Hi, kitty cats. The Trump administration just released their version of the Cass Review, which is distinguished only by even worse substantiation of their political agendas. The Department of Health and Human Services delivered a ridiculous attempt to appear unbiased toward conservative Christian ethics, but failed miserably. So let's talk about how science received this review. All right, well, if you're watching this, I am Dr. Amethysta Herrick. I'm an author and a podcaster. You can check the link that's down below there for more information about me and the work that I do. The website, as you can see, is purplepawclan.com, where you will be able to follow me on all the social networks, as well as read my articles and view my podcasts. So if you like this content, I hope you're going to consider subscribing at purplepawclan.com, because you can subscribe for as low as $5 a month at this point. And I also publish articles and podcasts by other contributors. So if you're interested in contributing your work, promoting gender and identity study, I encourage you to email me through the contact page right there on the website. All right, so let me start off by saying hi to Margie. Good to see you here. We'll move on to, what's the purpose of this? Why am I talking about this? The Trump administration campaigned, the way they ended up coming into power, they campaigned on attacking the gender expansive community. They used scare tactics that implied transgender women, such as myself, are dangerous to women in bathrooms and locker rooms. And they used even more scare tactics, encouraging people to express an identity outside, more scare tactics that implied that if you express an identity outside conservative Christian ethics, that is harmful and dangerous. And despite a majority of voters, 2 out of 3 folks, despite a majority of voters who don't believe the government should regulate gender at all, Trump has signed many executive orders limiting freedom of gender expression. So in one of those executive orders, allegedly there to protect children from chemical and surgical mutilation, is this quote. I'm quoting here. The Secretary of Health and Human Services shall publish a review of the existing literature on best practices for promoting the health of children who assert gender dysphoria, rapid onset gender dysphoria, or other identity-based confusion. You can see this is already politically motivated. We're talking about rapid onset gender dysphoria, which has been long since debunked. And then we're talking about confusion, identity-based confusion. What the hell? I'm actually going to address a couple of things here. Mama Llama Full of Love, I think that's what it is, says she's pretty upset. I'm going to assume this is a she. Pretty upset with Trump because he took away a PBS channel and that was for your kids. Oh, wow. Well, apparently he's too busy protecting children from chemical and surgical mutilation. I'm sorry that he did that. Absolutely. Brenda says, Amethyst, I can't believe it took me that long to draw the connection with your name. Which connection, I wonder? I don't know. All right. Trump demanded this Health and Human Services, HHS, review of gender-affirming care. The document was released this week. In fact, there were 2 documents. One of them is 409 pages that reviews existing literature as well as gives definitions that pretty much the rest of the scientific world doesn't use. The other one is a 9-page executive summary, which is included in the larger document. So I'm going to tell you about what I've seen already. I'm going to admit flat out, I did not sit down and read this entire 409-page document. I did read the executive summary completely, and I've skimmed many parts of how they performed the review. And so I want to talk about the initial reactions that I have right now, because I'm pretty confident, this is going to get a lot of challenges. So, oh, look, I got Miss Chief here. Hello. And hi, Bobby Bamlett. Good to see you. All right. Let's talk about how science isn't done. I related this document, the HHS document, to the Cass Review. But there are some major differences. First of all, Cass at least has a name attached. If nothing else, at least Hillary Cass, right? Cass also publishes the list of people in the review board. So the list of people who are going to review existing literature and whatever other data they were going to review, as well as how they responded to a request for information before they were admitted to the review board. Cass also published the experimental protocol that allegedly provided evidence-based conclusions in the final report. I want to point out, in no way do I agree with what Cass did in the Cass review. This is just a comparison to say that the HHS document has no names attached. HHS was supposedly peer-reviewed, but nobody was cited in that. HHS did not do original research. There's no original research in that. It is a review of existing systematic reviews. Maybe you're wondering why I'm concerned about no names attached. This is a huge red flag for a scientist. After the document was released, HHS published a press release that said, oh, no, people totally, like scientists, we're totally part of this, totally. There were 8 distinguished scholars, as a quote, 8 distinguished scholars. None of them is named. So let me tell you, when you're a graduate student, if you're in science, if you're in a scientific graduate program, you have to go and look at journals regularly. When you look at journals, you're not reading the whole thing, whether it's online or if it's paper. They were all paper, of course, when I was a graduate student, because it was last millennium and all. But you scan the contents because you're looking for people as well as subjects. Science is very different from engineering. Science is an observation of the universe, and you use that to develop theories about how the universe operates. Engineering, on the other hand, uses those theories of operation, and generally they make something. The point is to make something. Like an engineer can point to something and go, hey, look at that. Do you see that? I made that bridge. You know, I used our understanding of physics or geology, soil science, metallurgy, material science, somebody help me out. But they can point to this and go, we made that. Scientists don't do that. Our output is journal articles. And typically, you don't have scientists making tangible products. So what's the purpose of a journal article? In short, name recognition. I mean, you know, it's good to get new theories out there, but for the most part, we don't have these huge, big, huge articles with new theories in it. Most of it is for name recognition. Today, you almost never will see a brand new scientist who comes forward with this earth-shattering conclusion. If you think back to, presumably here, nobody here was there at the time, but if you look at 1903, 1904, Albert Einstein, when he was working at the patent office, or he's a clerk somewhere, published 2 articles, one for the photoelectric effect and the other one about Brownian motion. I think it was 1905, he published his paper about special relativity. That came out of nowhere. You're not going to see that today because science people, we're in high school. We start trying to do research with a principal investigator. You almost certainly have to do undergraduate research just to get into graduate school. And then when you get into graduate school, you're doing research. That's your purpose. You're probably, in order to do anything else, you're going to do a postdoc, do postdoctoral research, possibly 2. And the whole time you're doing this, you're writing journal articles. That's what we do. We write journal articles. There's no such thing as a nobody in science because the product of science is a person's thought, a scientist's thoughts, tested and verified. That's what it is. So why do I care about anything? Why am I telling you any of this? Not putting names on something like this, something released by the government, is highly atypical. Like I start to think, are they just searching for 8 people who are willing to stick their names on it? Because believe me, scientists are not going to ask for anonymity. More likely, a scientist would say, I'll agree to work on this, but you have to put me first on the thing. So Big C says, "What's the message here?" Well, you're 10 minutes into this, man. Give me a moment to get there. I'll totally get there. What I'm getting here, because 999 asks, is we got a CAS review from the Trump administration, and I think it's a bunch of bullshit. So I hope you stick around and listen to what I have to say. Brenda N here says she read the first 70 or so pages of the long document. Ooh, it really surpassed my knowledge in its references to research papers. Well, hopefully now that it's out, experts can pick it apart. All right. Ned 7000 here says he's got an AA in humanities, and even he knows you have to cite sources and name names in any academic paper, especially if you're calling it a review. So they do mention review articles, and I'm going to get there. Give me 1 second. Because let's talk about peer review. Peer review is very important in the academic world. Because there's no such thing as a nobody in science, we end up reviewing each other. Typically, when you're going to do a peer review, it's anonymous. I'm going to say typically, because the way that they want this to work is that in an academic journal, they want reviews to be anonymous so that it cuts down on political ramifications. And I'm dead serious. We're talking politics and science. There's definitely politics in science. You can be a popular person and still be criticized. I'm going to take a step back. Big C, I don't know why I assume it's your gender, because I just did. If you want to correct me, go ahead, and I will use that if you're asking me to. There's no doubt. So if you're in a small field, I said it's typically anonymous. If you're in a small field, you generally can guess who's reviewing your articles. My graduate research, a lot of it was in semiconductor electrochemistry, which I'm going to tell you, there's not a lot of people in that. Like I reviewed several of the same people's articles because it's just what you do. So peer review certainly isn't perfect, but has the intent at least to make sure that journals don't print poorly done science. So that's peer-reviewed journals. When there are enough articles sitting out there, we do what's called a systematic review. These aren't things that you do once a year. You really don't. You wait until you have a lot of articles, and you summarize those results. This is generally not new research. You're combining the results of anywhere from 10 to 50, maybe 100 individual articles in the field. And the people who do these systematic reviews are usually very highly respected in their fields. My graduate advisor did a systematic review on semiconductor electrochemistry at least once when I was in graduate school. And it was, no new research. Reviewed his work and then also the work of many other people. But these people, how do they get respected? They get respected because they put out good science. And because they put out good science, they're trusted to represent this greater field that's being reviewed. The HHS document, as I mentioned, is a systematic review. In fact, it's a systematic review of systematic reviews. The people who are doing this should be very highly respected. Not naming them. It's suspicious. I'm not going to kid you. It's very suspicious. And it brings to mind the idea, what happened with the CAS review. At least the CAS review, when CAS was starting the review board, she published the names of the people who were going to be involved. And, there was a huge backlash, just to be totally on the level. There was a big backlash because some of the people on the review, or the review board, had actually answered a questionnaire that says they believed transgender people didn't exist. Now, maybe you go, okay, well, you got to have a balanced thing. Well, the purpose of that review is allegedly to review the efficacy of gender-affirming treatments, not whether or not gender identity was real or whether transgender people exist, yada, yada. So there was a big backlash. But I'm going to tell you, as a scientist, as somebody who's doing this, when we don't know who reviews all of this data, we have no way of knowing that it's objective. We have no way of knowing why these conclusions were come to. So it's a huge red flag. Just going to tell you that. Huge red flag. All right, let me see what we got here. 999, am I an alphabet person? Well, you can spell my name with the alphabet, so yeah, there you go. Big C goes by Toaster. Sounds good. Okay. So anyway, when I referred to Big C as him, I really intended to say, I'm sorry, Toast. The Blind Swan says, reminds them, going to say them, of stuff that happened in the 30s. Ooh, that's a good point, isn't it? Somebody with just an emoji has told me a veered off path. I'm stationary. I'm stationary. What are you even talking about? Crazy. V says male and female. Hey, good point. There you go. Male and female. You've discussed the two sexes. I'm talking about things about gender. So there you go. Somebody who has also said scientists who say transgender people exist are not true scientists. I'm sorry, man. I'm right here doing it. So there you go. All right. Don't forget to get your colonoscopy at 50. Well, actually, that's being recommended to everybody these days, isn't it? So thank you, Blind Swan. My name is Serena. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm actually trans myself. Serena, it's phenomenal to meet you. Thank you so much, and thank you for telling me your pronouns. All right, let's look at some other things here. Okay. Yu Chan, hopefully that's right. A lot of people are blowing a small non-issue out of proportion, something that's like 1% of everything into something that looks like 90%, 95% of everything by cherry-picking data and not interviewing. Not interviewing people who are being impacted. Absolutely. I'm going to get there. Margie says, I can state that I exist. Cogito ergo doleo. There you go. I think, therefore I am depressed. Well done. Not often do I get Latin jokes in live streams, but there you go. I'm going to have to, oh gosh, whoever it is, emoji person here says, if you believe in transgenderism, okay, then you study politics, not biology. Really? I went through 3.5 years of molecular biology degree. Then I switched over to chemistry. I was like two classes away from finishing a molecular biology degree. Then I finished a BS in chemistry, finished a Ph.D. in chemistry. I've done postdoctoral research in chemistry. Do I study politics there, champ? No, not at all. Big C says weird flex. Really? I don't know. I've got somebody who's telling me that male and female. If that's a weird flex to say that I actually have some experience with the science, that's a bummer that you think that's a weird flex. Because we're talking about politicians here. Who are the politicians? Like, does Trump have any background in molecular biology? Big C, go and find out. I'd love to hear what Toast says. All right. When we're looking at these reviews, HHS and CAS both said that they were going to focus on evidence-based medicine. What's evidence-based medicine? Evidence-based in any kind of research implies that it's quantifiable. You can get a number. You're trying to get something that could be measured with an instrument, something that is supposedly largely objective. So I'm gonna give an example. Here's an example in pharmaceuticals. Big C, listen up. You'll hear some of my bits here. In pharmaceuticals, we know that humans need to store iron in the body. Iron is used to make hemoglobin, but we tend to eliminate iron ions in ion format from the blood. It goes through the kidneys and we eliminate it. So we have to store it in these special big biological ways to prevent its elimination. In fact, actually, it's done in this big sort of proteinaceous crazy thing called ferritin. And so that's a way that we store iron. When you go and you make a new medication to improve iron retention, you can look for the concentration of iron ion or ferritin in particular in blood or in other tissues to see that iron is stored there. That's pretty clear cut. It's relatively easily detected, but there are a lot of medications with results that aren't easily measured. In fact, we could look at, one of the big medications that are out there now, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, SSRIs. These are used for treating depression because neuroscientists believe that there is a connection with the brain concentration of serotonin and the ability to regulate depression. So if you inhibit the reuptake of serotonin, you have a greater concentration of serotonin there, and hopefully you end up being able to mitigate or regulate your depression. But it is strikingly difficult to measure brain chemicals. In the brain, they're very low concentrations, and it's tough to measure these things. The range also, like if you're looking at serotonin, brain serotonin, the range that we see varies widely. And that's not just for people who are diagnosed with clinical depression, it's both. So, when a new depression medication comes out, and they're not all SSRIs now, I know that. There are newer types of medications coming out. The FDA still wants a clinical trial. And these clinical trials rely on self-reporting. Something along the lines of, do you feel depressed today? Do you have a positive outlook for the future? I did my Ph.D. in analytical chemistry. Much of what I did was talk about data acquisition, data analysis, and when you get down to something like an FDA clinical trial that uses self-reporting, that is not necessarily bad data. It's a measurement. It's a measurement that can occasionally change because someday even Big C feels depressed, and then sometimes Big C does not feel depressed the next day. It's not bad data. It's a measurement. It can't be correlated to something measured by an instrument. But I want to point out, this is how the FDA ends up approving many drugs. Is one better than the other? Believe me, if you're a scientist and you can measure something with an instrument, you better know. We're going to do it. That's what we do. That's what I studied. Analytical chemistry is how do we end up acquiring this data, right? But gender is not something we can measure just yet, at all. And neither are many of the conditions for which the FDA approves medications every year that people like politicians are using every day. Politicians' families are using every day. But the inability to measure something with an instrument doesn't mean the condition doesn't exist. The inability to measure something with an instrument doesn't mean the treatment isn't effective. So why am I bringing this up? Because you're going, wait, we were talking about the HHS document. The HHS document, like Cass, excluded data, excluded systematic review based on their interpretation of what evidence-based medicine should mean. How much was excluded? New Chan, I believe you were the one who said this, right? How much was cherry picking? How much was excluded? Well, they did publish those numbers. It's fascinating. I don't know the numbers for Cass. HHS published them directly in the document. From literature databases, they found 3,543 systematic reviews. I'm going to pause for a moment. That means there were likely anywhere, so if you have 3,500 systematic reviews, and there's anywhere from 10 to maybe 50 journal articles that you include in a systematic review, we're probably looking at anywhere from 25,000, 50,000, maybe 100,000 articles in these reviews. This is not in 1 year. This is over the course of a decade, possibly more. And while there will be some overlap in these reviews, because there will always be some overlap, that's a lot of data. That's a lot of data. As many as 100,000 journal articles over the course of a decade or two. All right, HHS, the document that was just published, excluded 3,526 out of 3,543. If you didn't bring your calculator with you, I'm not surprised. That means that HHS used 17 systematic reviews for its conclusions. 17. I'm not doing the number exactly in my head, but what is that? 0.005%, 0.05% of the data that's out there, 0.5%, 0.5%. That's what HHS used. Holy cats. Why did HHS exclude all this data? They excluded them because gender is not easily measured. Cass got around that. The Cass review got around that. They had their own experimental protocol, which was a very doubtful measure. All right, I'm just going to throw that out there. Their indication of evidence-based measure, their interpretation of evidence-based measures was, did a healthcare provider refer the patient to a specialized gender clinic? Now, I'm going to point out, this is a decision a doctor makes, not the patient, whether or not to refer a patient on. It is certainly binary. Either the patient was referred or not. It's something you can quantify. How many people did you refer this year? 16. Okay. It's also a measurement you can make reproducibly. How many people did you refer this year? 16. Whoa, reproducible. Holy cats, right on. Amazing. But it was still a judgment by a doctor. And that is precisely what evidence-based medicine is supposed to prevent. Cass did this. HHS is excluding way more than 95% of all data that's been taken about gender-affirming care over the course of decades. What? All right, let me go to comments here. Serena, hopefully you're still here. Oh, you are. Thank you. I'm glad you're still here. Apologies for these people making some jokes about you. I have no idea why this is, even of interest to people. But let's see. Brenda says, Trump understanding molecular biology. There's a whole lot of smiles there. Margie says that's a scream of a burn. Yes. All right. New Chan says, for those who say trans women have an advantage, as somebody who's MTF trans myself, you have to work to keep that muscle mass. Something natal women also have to do. There are no inherent advantages or disadvantages. Well, there's actually a book that's coming out really soon here. I think it's June. Star Vartan is the person's name. I'm plugging this because I actually act as an advisor on this. I'm even named in the foreword. I was kind of happy about that. But this book is called The Stronger Sex, I believe is ultimately the title that Star settled on. And it has to do with the difference between male and female biology. And ultimately what Star determines is that hormone balance plays a much bigger role than genetics, which every geneticist would know because most of genetics is in the allosomes. It's chromosomes 1 through 22, not chromosome 23, where one of the pair could be a Y chromosome that has essentially one gene that does much of anything. So anyway, they train and work out just like anybody else, says Niu-chan. If you lose, train harder and get over it. Yeah, it's pretty true. Margie says it also varies wildly and randomly. Yeah. Yeah, what's crazy is that, there was somebody who was called transgender in the Olympics. She was a boxer. Really dang good boxer, would probably knock me right out. Not because she's transgender, but because she's a good boxer and I'm not. So, agreed, Margie, nobody can predict if this will happen, so it's silly to claim this was done for sports advantage. All right. Let me see what we got here. New Chan says, somebody who thinks P less than 0.05 actually means something. Oh, there you go. All right. Health and Human Services. This document that just came out from HHS. This is based on 17 systematic reviews, and it makes very bold claims that gender-affirming care is harmful. Who wrote some of these journal articles? Who wrote some of these systematic reviews? Who wrote or who states publicly that gender-affirming care is life-saving in some situations? Well, we're talking about scientists in the American Medical Association, the American Psychiatric Association, the Endocrine Society, the American Psychological Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics, and the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. That's a shit ton of scientists there. And what's kind of ironic, because we can't measure gender with an instrument, politicians are going about regulating it. This has nothing to do with protecting children. Absolutely nothing. You can look at real values. Less than 1 in 1,000 children, at least in the United States, are treated medically for gender dysphoria. Now we're down to 0.1%. Usually they say 1%, right? If you look at other statistics, it's interesting. In children, the estimate will go as high as about 2.5%. And yet 2.5% who report gender dysphoria, and yet 0.1% are treated medically. Is this a rampant epidemic of biblical proportions? No, but this certainly does have to do with imposing Christian ethics on society. In the name of science, the Bible has become medicine. And then you can just give the Bible some new translation and you make it appear more scientific. But at the end, make no mistake, they are not protecting children from pain. They are protecting children, preventing children from learning enough about themselves to challenge ethics that never suited a free society in the first place. I don't even have to discuss the conclusions drawn in the HHS document. It's suspicious, as it is, with no indication of who reviewed this data. It uses a startlingly low amount of research to come to its very bold conclusions. It throws out the door decades, 50 years minimum, of research to come to these conclusions. And despite stating explicitly that, quote, it is not a clinical practice guideline, nor does it issue legislative or policy recommendation. It goes on to recommend what clinicians, medical organizations, and therapists should do when these healthcare professionals are the ones who did the work in order for those systematic reviews to be written in the first place. The Health and Human Services document was not written by scientists, and it sure as shit wasn't written for scientists. There you go. There's my thoughts on the HHS document. It's even worse than the CAST review. At least the CAST review made a vague attempt at pulling together some data that was vaguely evidence-based. Poorly, yes. But holy crap, I mean, you're not going to name who did this. You're not actually going to discuss data like as a scientist. Throw it out the window. I'm all done. Let's see what else we got here. Serena says they're making jokes about me. I'm partially blind. I can't see it. Well, you know what? I think they suck. Serena. There. Done, said. Corey asks, what does the Board of Gynecology and Obstetrics say? Frankly, I don't know. Usually gynecology would probably not come into this, but, if you have a statistic, Corey, I would actually adore it. Well, I don't see you're still in the thing, but if you have a statistic, I'd love you to send it to me. Love it if you sent it to me in DM. All right, what else do we have here? Let's see. Brenda says, thank you for putting the documents used into perspective. You're welcome. They added a lot about the reliability of the existing research, making it look like they disregarded bad data. Well, exactly. It's really interesting. So Joker Militia says, this dude doesn't go to a gynecologist or reads about anything they say. Turns out, actually, I do go to a gynecologist. I'll throw that out there. And Joker Militia, I've got the sense I'm reading more than you do. Just saying. Let's throw out, what you're reading about here. Or are you just reading what Marjorie Taylor Greene tweeted? Just saying. All right, let's see. Disregarding bad data. Yeah, they're disregarding what is not evidence-based. And I'm telling you, the thing is that I'm not trying to say that we should not use evidence-based medicine. Absolutely we should. The thing is that there are many, many measures that medical professionals use that cannot be measured with an instrument. One of them is whether or not you feel better. We can measure things like blood concentration of things. That's easy for the most part. Depends on what it is. For the most part, that's easy. But medicine, the reason I brought up any point about science and engineering is because medicine is an engineering type of discipline. Right? I mean, they're not making theories. What they're doing is applying theories' understanding of biology to make people feel better. And if you're doing research and you're saying, well, these people feel better, and then you have somebody else who goes, we don't really care. What we're going to do is say, you can't determine if they feel better, therefore we're disregarding your data. Joker Militia says, they're an MD and I'm wrong. Okay. Perfect. So then what you'll do is, I guess, send me something in DMs. I appreciate that. Thank you, Joker Militia. Because I don't want to argue with you. My point is, send me the data. If I'm wrong, just show me I'm wrong. It's pretty easy, right? You must know. You must know. So send it to me. Ned 7000 says, 17 reviews is less than I read while talking to my doctor about gender affirming care. And probably less than most trans people have read. I think you're probably right. Now, bear in mind, these are again, systematic reviews. So it's reviews of articles, not necessarily the articles themselves, but rather a compilation of the data. So it's not even like just 17 journal articles. It could be, anywhere from 50 to maybe even 1,000 different published peer-reviewed articles. So it is sort of hilarious. Because I got to be willing to bet that most transgender people are reading so many articles. It's way more than 17. So, all right. Margie has said preach. I got a little heated toward the end there, didn't I? It pisses me off that we're going to look at somebody that we're looking at people who are trying to entrench Christian ethics into American society. Right? These are, we've already got the First Amendment. And I understand an executive order. I've done plenty of live streams about this. An executive order is not a law. Trump is not the legislative branch. He only enforces laws. He does not create them. So his executive orders, while foolish, can't really, legislate identity. But there's the First Amendment says that Congress shall make no law establishing or abridging a religion. There's establishing a state religion nor abridging religion of the citizens. That's the First Amendment. Those are the first few words of it. I may have quoted it slightly wrong. But here's the point. If you have a government, if you have a president who is saying, what I'm going to do is establish Christian ethics as the foundation of this government, you violated that First Amendment, period. Every single one of us who's out there expressing our identity, we are guaranteed freedom of expression, freedom of expressing those things. Trump is violating that First Amendment, period. All right. New Chan says, most of my immediate family is religious. Yeah, and are against me surgically transitioning. Yeah. Yeah. Based on what, too? Ask them that. Not based on science. Not based on whether or not people feel better after surgically getting some sort of medical transition, because I've done that. And I will tell you, I feel so much better. Anybody who would say, you know what, we want to prevent people from feeling better, are those people protecting us? Are they helping us? Are they do they want us to feel better? No. No. So Miss Chief comes up with a very good comment, and I totally want to address this. One problem I have is that they measure that they feel better, but not what's best. It's a good point. If you give all kids a week off from school, they'd report feeling better, although it wouldn't be what's best. True. What is best? Because, can we determine that? The big point, and even the HHS document makes a point, and I'm probably going to misquote this, but they make a point to say that for some people, gender-affirming care helps. And in some situations, yeah, sure, maybe even life-saving, but not for everybody. And this rampant epidemic of medical transition, which again, I will point out, less than 1 in 1,000. Less than 1 in 1,000, all right? If they're going to say it's a rampant epidemic, the point that I want to make, and this is maybe my best point, is that this is not something a politician knows about. What WPATH, and I'll remind everybody again, I'm a member of WPATH, a voting member of WPATH. What we recommend is that youth get no more than puberty blockers prior to 18. That's the recommendation. It's what I have said this whole time. The idea that this document is going to overturn 50 years worth of empirical evidence because they just want to install Christian ethics into the United States. It was ridiculous. So what is best? What's best, Miss Chief, I will tell you. This is what I think is best. What's best is for a patient and a doctor to have a conversation, not for a politician to make a law. And in fact, for that matter, I want to say Malefica, which is just right there. I'm loving your name. Malefica, Malefica, says, I wish politicians would listen to people smarter than them. I wish politicians would just plain listen. I saw a statistic. There was a recent poll done on whether or not people want their politicians even to consider gender, regulating gender expression, regulating gender-affirming care, and 2 out of 3, it was 67%, I believe was the exact number, 67%, which included, no shit, 57% of Republicans said they didn't want their politicians even to touch this. So Ms. Chief says basically it needs long-term studies to measure what's best. Listen, I don't disagree. I don't disagree. We have 100 years worth of studies. How long-term do we need? I mean, that's the real question. Yes, there's no doubt there are some people who will get some gender-affirming care, and they will go, ooh, you know what? I didn't need this. I thought I did, but I don't. I thought I wanted to be called they, them, but I don't. I thought I wanted to be whatever. You know? Maybe they go back, and that's fine. I don't think that's wrong. The thing is, what these reports are trying to do is prevent people from even exploring it. You know, they don't. If you don't have the ability to explore it, you don't have the ability to determine if you wanted it. Ms. Chief says, think that's something the Cass report points out, although there's lots of evidence. What's necessary is better evidence, which unfortunately is impossible. No, it's unfortunately not possible according to Hillary Cass. Once again, I'm telling you, we've probably got 100,000 articles out there. I mean, I'm not counting them. But there are many tens of thousands of articles of people who have been doing this for, it could be 50 years. WPATH has evidence that goes back 50 years. So New Chan says one of their fears is that you'll regret the decision. Absolutely. Here's the funny thing, too. Well, here we go. New Chan says if they regret it, let them. Truth. I mean, you are an adult, right? If you regret it, okay, that's fine. That's fine. You regret it. Malefica says, yeah, much was destroyed 100 years ago. Very true. Yeah, there was a lot going on in Berlin. I think you're probably mentioning. A lot was going on in Berlin, the turn of the century. And the Nazi regime came in and said, ooh, gosh, these people are different from us. We better shut that right down. And so they did. Somebody else, I'm trying to remember who it was, mentioned that it seemed like in the 1930s. I kind of think it was Serena who mentioned that. Yeah, it's crazy. It's very crazy. What's people who are different than you, why do we need to regulate them? That's frightening. That's very frightening. Margie did also make a good point, says, absolutely, for example, it would be better to study progesterone than to block access for lack of evidence of efficacy. It is medical professionals, for what it's worth. It depends on where you are. I'm in an informed consent state, and I read my own, I read the research that's out there around progesterone, and I asked my clinic for it, and they said, you've been informed. Do you consent? And I said, I do. And they said, here's your progesterone. Some of the problem here is that, as Ms. Chief points out, it's difficult to do some of these things. It's difficult to do a long-term study that goes from, if you 8 years old, let's say, if you take somebody who is 10, and there are situations in which even WPATH guidelines will recommend something like a puberty blocker. if you take somebody from 10 up to like 40, 50, like I've got to wonder, like who, at what point is that long term enough? Because this is a very common criticism of gender affirming care is that it's like, do we at what point are we done studying it? And we can keep on saying, well, listen, we need to study it for 10 years. And then we'll hit 10 years and they'll go, yeah, but we should probably do 20 years. We could hit 20 years and they'll go, well, but we still don't like it, so how about 30? It just keeps moving. I mean, there's no way to get around that. So there you go. Malefica, thank you so much for the rose. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Let's see. So Miss Chief says, and I appreciate this. Well, first of all, Margie says, yeah, there's no way to find regret other than trying. And Miss Chief says, explore is a good term. Yeah, totally. Jasmine says, try on and see if it fits. Yeah, agreed. But, Miss Chief, you're saying no law ever stopped anyone doing that. Oh, really? Oh, really? Because this HHS document, again, not a clinical practice guideline, nor does it issue legislative or policy recommendations, but the executive order in which this document was commissioned pretty much calls this live stream dangerous and harmful. It calls what I've done dangerous and harmful. There's not a law, no. But you may recall there was a Supreme Court decision in the UK just, Sunday? There are laws being passed. There's one in Tennessee right now. It's going to go to the Supreme Court about whether or not only transgender people should be prevented from getting gender-affirming care. If you're cisgender and you have precocious puberty, that's cool. We'll give you gender-affirming care. If you are transgender, they want to prevent you from doing it. That's a law. And it's been challenged. It was challenged, ultimately by the Biden administration, put its weight behind it, went to the Supreme Court. There are laws. There are laws. And Chief, I'm not trying to, I love you. We're good friends. Give you a heart, right? It's difficult to justify any of this. I definitely believe that exploration is good. Absolutely, it's good. That being said, you can't explore if you're not allowed to explore. There are laws that prevent you from getting gender-affirming care in some places. And Brenda says they conflate therapy, HRT, and blockers with surgery. It's a good point. Again, WPATH recommends no surgery prior to 18 years old. Prior to 18 years old. Where are all these 10-year-olds who go off to a junior high school and come home with a vagina? It's ridiculous. It's ludicrous. New-Chan says, anybody remember the left-handed epidemic? So Ned 7000 raises their left hand. I'm raising mine because I'm also left-handed. Margie also remembers it, says it's amazing how the numbers stabilized. Ooh, it's a good point. They suddenly stabilized. I wonder why. So weird. Ooh, gosh, here you go. I'm just going to call you V because it sounds fun. So V says, a government that seeks to prevent me from doing what I want with my body will do the same to you. So true. This is not about, not just about transgender people. This is not about protecting children. This is also going to end up being about preventing women from doing all kinds of things. Ultimately, it's going to spread. They're going to get tired of, once I'm regulated out of existence, they will get tired of me. Well, they will move on to somebody else. They'll move on to women. They'll move on to minorities. They'll move on to, who knows, maybe they'll move on to people who emigrated here, right? You never know. Seems like they're doing some of that now. They will do the same to you. Very true. If they prevent me, they'll do it to you. We will have established a precedent. So thank you so much. Fee! All right, let me see. So Shakespeare says, By the way, Shakespeare. It took me so long. I was reading that at some point. I went, oh my gosh, it's a play on Shakespeare. I've known you for what, 6 months? More? I'm only just getting this. Okay. But Shakespeare says, oh, I see exploratory therapy being replaced with the much more aggressively named reparative therapy. Yeah, conversion therapy. Yeah, through delay and obstruct as the care strategy. So for what it's worth, the HHS document recommends psychotherapy. I just want to point out, okay, I want to point out psychotherapy is not evidence-based medicine. I mean, it's fucking hilarious, right? You've got to go, well, we need something you can measure. Yeah, so psychotherapy. Okay, there you go. We're going to replace something with something that is not evidence-based with something that is not evidence-based. Well done, HHS, well done. Shakespeare also says that they said they wanted progesterone, and so, oh, the doctor gave it to you. That's good. Yeah, glad to be in a decent state for transgender care. True. Yeah, informed consent states. There you go. Oh, Miss Chief says, I'm lovely, not dangerous and harmful. Thank you. Again, I'm not angry with you. You're my best friend. Right after Jasmine. Okay, you can be right after her. So, is that cool? All right, Margie says she gets progesterone in New Zealand because you were already on it. If you were a new patient, it would be much harder. Yeah, I'm sure. Definitely. New Chan says spearmint, the most dangerous of the mints. We have evidence-based medicine that says that spearmint is the worst tasting gum. And actually 4 out of 5 dentists recommend against spearmint to their patients who chew gum. There you go. All right. So V says, I'll never forget when I came out to my aunt. She told me, V says, so I'm going to, well, wait a minute. Maybe I'm unsure who this is or how this goes. It says, I'll never forget when I came out to my aunt, she told me I needed therapy and testosterone. And then there's a sad face. For a second, I thought you might have been trans mask. And I was going to say, wow, so great for your aunt. But I'm assuming that's a no. And she was telling you needed psychotherapy and more masculine hormones in order to prevent that. And wow, that sucks. That is a crying moment. How horrible. How horrible. Okay, thank you, V. No MTF is what V says. So what a... Ugh. I'm sorry. Let's see. What do we got here? So anything else? Okay, so Shakespeare. Yeah, so Shakespeare says it's like Shakespeare in the Park, but with more mauling. The other thing, too, an interesting little tidbit here. Most women would rather meet Shakespeare in the forest than a man. Yeah, it's true. It's not evidence-based medicine, but it is true. I saw it on Twitter, which probably means it's true, right? Probably true. All right, Miss Chief says, yay, we're best friends. Woo! And Margie says she loves spearmint. So there, I'm dangerous. For the most part, I don't like... I'm trying to figure out how I want to put this. I didn't want to say... I don't like doing these things. I don't like that I have to do a live stream. I'd love to do a live stream where somebody just said, hey, tell me what it's like to be transgender. Does it hurt? Tell me what it's like. So V says with time, she now agrees the transition was the best decision I've ever made. So does my family. With the notable exception of like 1 or 2, maybe 4 people, almost everybody says, wow, you are definitely a better person. And I agree with you, V, who says she thinks they just need time and more exposure to people like us because they will see. And I wish I could do live streams like that. I wish I could do live streams where you just have your aunt come and ask me dumb questions. Not dumb questions, but the most ludicrous questions she might have. Because I don't believe that what we are is dangerous. We're being vilified. We're being made scapegoats by conservative Christians for no good reason. No good reason. There are no statistics backing up. The transgender women are out there going into bathrooms and assaulting women. There's no good evidence of that. There's no good evidence that there are children who go to school, go to their junior high school, and somehow end up getting a vaginoplasty. Like, how'd that even come together? It came together in the exact same way as they're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats. It's made up crap. Niu Chan says, honestly, I kind of wish people that knew nothing of our work would mind their own business. I do too. I understand the concerns. I understand the concerns because I have a kid myself, right? And I'm certainly concerned that our son ends up growing up getting the best care they can for the rest of their life. Okay? I do indeed want to see a better future for our children, because holy cats, this is not it. Oh my gosh, not at all it. So I understand the concern. I certainly do. When what we do, however, is codify, ultimately, Christian ethics as laws, that's dangerous. You know, all I ask is that some people listen to scientists. I don't think that's a bad thing. 17 reviews out of 3,500? You're going to that's a significant cherry pick. I'm trying to remember who used that word. That's a big cherry pick, right? I mean, 17 out of 3,500 is significant. Holy cats. All right. What do we got here? Ned's got a great point here. If we allow gender-affirming care, next we'll allow women to speak in public in pineapple on pizza. It's a slippery slope in this year of our Lord 1825. Very true. Very, very true. But Brenda does say no pineapple on pizza. It's unnatural. Yeah. Oh gosh. So Niu Chan says, if anything, my family being against it has hardened my resolve to do it behind their back and not tell them jack shite in regards to it. That'll hurt them even more when or if they find out, because they'll have no idea it happened. See, that's the funny bit. Like when you prevent somebody, you know, we're talking about, actually, I'm going to derail myself for just 1 second because I only have a couple of minutes. JK, and I don't know if you're still here. You are. JK says, don't I like Christians? It's not that I don't like Christians. Christianity as a rule is not bad. The ethics of Christianity is not bad. Some Christians have the tendency to be preachy and impose what they believe on everybody else who's around them. I don't like it. I don't like people who impose their beliefs on everybody around them. And you know what, JK? That actually that actually includes some liberals. I've had plenty of liberals who have screamed at me because I'm not a Democrat. I'm in the middle here. But it does include some liberals who will scream at me, what's wrong with me? Right? Casey Schmidt, I'm going to get to your comment in a second, but here we go. V also says, yeah, let women speak, but we need to slow down on the pineapple and pizza. Let's talk about that. Very true. It looks like Casey Schmidt, oh wait, did you come back? Maybe you came back. So Casey asks the question, and this is going to be the last thing I'm going to say. Do I believe children should be able to transition? I have said this in almost every single live stream I've ever done. The answer is no. No, because I am a voting member of WPATH, and our guidelines recommend no more than puberty blockers, so not gender transition, prior to the age of 18, in which case these children will be adults. So I think when you say transition, you might be saying gender-affirming care. Gender-affirming care, yes, because you don't know if you want to change your gender unless you explore it. Transition, no. Gender-affirming care, yes. And I hope the distinction between the two, Casey Schmidt, it looks like you're still here. Good. Hopefully that distinction is clear. And if it's not, I want to ask you a favor, Casey, DM me, because I'd love to have a conversation with you, and you know, we can go over some of this stuff if you'd like. There's a distinction. There's a distinction. All right, I'm going to look. Here's a couple of comments here that I'm going to throw out. All right, the single only obstacle Margie has faced to stop her speaking in public has been trans people who have been oppressing me, right? I mean, it is sort of interesting there sometimes, but All right. Here's a funny point. Ned 7000. There are more people who enjoy pineapple on pizza than there are trans people. I bet you that's true. Right. All right. Jalen now says, yep, children should be able to transition. Um, I hope I've said enough of my piece here to make that clear. I'm now an hour in. As I was trying to say, I don't enjoy doing these things. I really love to be able to promote being transgender rather than have to mitigate the effects of silly policies. But here we are. I appreciate that you all allow me to do this, and some of you even come in and talk to me while I'm doing it. So much love to all of you, and I will see you next weekend. Bye. Oh, sorry. Talk soon. Bye. And don't forget my website, purplepawclan.com.